Okay guys, so we're gonna try this recorded lesson thing again here. Let me put my glasses on so I can see. Okay, so looking at your pre-assessments, what we need to do is we need to go over this bad boy one more time. Some of you had parts of it right, some of you were all over the place, so here we go. Before we get started with this, I need you to grab 4 things. Okay, you need to grab, excuse me, 6 things. You need to grab 6 things. You need to grab a different color marker, color pencil, whatever you have, highlighter, because each of these boxes needs to be in a different color when you're taking notes. We're going to color code our notes today because I think it helps us remember things better when we link them to a color sometimes. Hit pause real quick and go grab 6 different colors to represent the 6 different elements of plot on your map. Hit pause, go. Alright, now that you've got your 6 different colors, one last thing I need you to do before we get started here is take your notes sheet and you're going to go to your notes section in your binder and you're going to glue this bad boy in on your first page. Okay, so I'll give you guys a couple seconds. Go ahead and glue this in to your binder. Okay, if you haven't finished gluing, hit pause. I'm going to get started here. Okay. Alright, so here is our beautiful plot map. Anytime you're plotting a story, this is what you should be given, is you have your little mountain, okay? Alright, so we're going to zoom in here, and we are going to look at what is the definition of plot. So the definition of plot is all the events that happen or make up a story. Okay, so the plot is all the events that happen or make up a story. Some of you were saying that this green box over here is plot. No, okay. The whole thing is plot. Your whole entire story, there's a plot to a story. Okay. A plot map, the thing that you are filling out, is a device used to plot a story. Okay. So the whole story, this whole map, like these are the events that take place in the plot. So the plot is all the events, and the plot map is the device we use to plot a story. Okay, if I'm moving too fast, go ahead and hit pause and get your notes down. And I will be checking to make sure that you are taking notes, so do fill out your plot map, okay? So this first box here, I'm gonna zoom in nice and big, is called your exposition. Okay, some of you learned it last year as your introduction. Same thing. If you put introduction, I counted it as correct. But we're going to call it an exposition this year, so you need to make sure that you understand that this is an exposition. So this little bone here, I want you to pick one of your colors. If you have green like I do, you are going to color that now. So the bone represents your exposition, whatever color you choose. So for me, I have it as green. So make sure you take your notes in green here, or like outline your box so that you know exposition, whatever color you have. Alright, definition of exposition is, it is everything that is told at the beginning of a story. Okay, so it's the stuff that we are introduced to, so introduction. The things that we are introduced to are always the characters and usually the setting. Where are the characters? Where is this taking place? Sometimes the setting changes, sometimes it doesn't, but that is what you would find out in the exposition, is who are your characters and what is the setting. Alright. So let's give an example. The exposition for The Veil would be the ghost story is Carlos is the main character. That's who we meet, and he finds the girl of his dreams at a cemetery. So I have said who, and I know where the story has kind of kicked off and is taking place, and it is this in a cemetery. Okay, that would be your exposition. The exposition for Story of an Hour would be we have met Louise, and she is in her house with her sister Josephine. Okay, so that is your exposition. The next one that we have is something that is new to you guys. I think in the past they called it rising action, rising action. This year we're introducing it as the inciting incident. Okay, so you can think of your inciting incident as a trigger. Okay, so to make that more sense, here we go. Your definition of an inciting incident is an inciting incident is the event that sets the story in motion. Sorry, I can't spell today. Okay, so it is whatever event, whatever triggers the story to kind of start taking place and get set into motion. So if we are looking at the Vale story, you will have the trigger event for the ghost story is that he asks her on a date. So he keeps asking her. He really wants to go out with this girl. It's him asking her on a date that sets the story into motion. If we didn't have that event, the story couldn't unfold. Okay. So with the Story of an Hour, the inciting incident is that she finds out that her husband has died. Without that event happening, the rest of the story does not make sense. It cannot happen without that event first taking place. So you can think of whatever incident that starts the problem, that gets the story going and starts building, that is your trigger event. That is your inciting incident. Okay. So we're going to call that a trigger event. So make sure you give this a new color here, color in your bone, outline it. Hope you picked a new color to write in. Forgot to tell you that before I got started, my apologies. But make sure that you give this box a new color. So here I have mine pink. You can give it whatever color you have. All right, if I'm moving too fast, go ahead and pause. You can get the notes, but we're going to move on here. Next one. Most everyone got this one right. You are correct. It is your rising action. So give this box a new color. Mine is orange. Color in your bone. Outline your box, whatever you need to do. So the rising action is all the events in the story that lead to the climax. Okay. So your rising action, like all the steps that you have to take to get to the top of your mountain, to the climax, okay? So again, looking at our examples of our stories, the ghost story, the rising action was the fact that he met her for a second time, and she finally agreed to a date. She would send him a letter in the mail of where to meet. Then he was so excited that he just couldn't pay attention at work, okay? Those are the steps that lead you to that climax, your turning point. In the Story of an Hour, your rising action is her sitting in her room, she's crying, and then finally she can feel something is like building inside of her. She doesn't know what, but something is trying to build up, and she's coming to a realization of something, but she just hasn't figured out what is it that her brain is trying to figure out. What is her body trying to get ready to tell her? So those are your rising actions. Those are your steps leading to your next element of plot. Okay, so we're going to move over here. All right, so the top of your mountain is called the climax or turning point. Okay. Go ahead and give this box a new color in your bone. Outline the box whatever color you want. I have blue. Just make sure that it is different than all the other elements of plot so far. So each box should have its own color, okay? Okay, so your climax or turning point is usually defined as the highest point of action in the story, or It is when the story takes the shift, and like, maybe what's a better way to word that? So it's the highest point of action, or when you come to a turning point. Okay, so let me explain that a little bit. The highest point of action isn't necessarily always going to be your climax. Sometimes your climax is actually a turning point. It's when do things shift? What is that moment, kind of like our trigger, that we've come to the problem and now we're about to turn a corner and we're going to start going towards the resolution. So the ghost story has more of a turning point than really a point of highest action, because the point of highest action that you guys put would actually kind of be in the falling action. So the turning point for the ghost story, The Lady in the Veil, is that he gets this letter and he shows his cousin, and his cousin puts together that the letter is from someone who died a year ago. Okay, so now this is our turning point, because without knowing that fact, the rest of the story couldn't happen. The end of the story wouldn't take place. Okay, so the turning point is when he in fact shows his cousin that letter. For the story of an hour, that story has kind of a moment of excitement, and it's when that feeling that was building in the rising action finally comes forward, and she's like, I'm free. I am free. And she just repeats it to herself. I'm free, free, free. Okay, that is your moment of highest point of action. Okay, because she's finally come to this realization that without her husband, she's a free woman. Because in this time, women didn't have rights. Whatever the men told her to do in her life, she had to do. She couldn't make really decisions for herself, but now that she's a widow, she can make decisions. She's on her own. She doesn't have this man in her life, though, although he did love her, controlling her, and she can be her own person finally. So she has that moment of realization where she's just finally free. Okay, so that would be your turning point, your climax for a story of an hour. All right. Okay, so we're gonna move on now. So most of you got this one right, so I'm not going to spend too much time on it because you did a fairly good job. So we have the falling action as your next element of plot. So here, make sure you give your bone a new color. I made my box purple, but you can find a different color that you would like, but make sure your notes are either in the color of the box or you've given it a different color than the rest of the plot map so far. All right, so falling action. Pretty self-explanatory. Falling action is the events that lead towards the resolution. Okay. So most of you, like I said, got this part right, so I'm not going to spend too much time on it. Falling action for the ghost story is when Carlos is going to the cemetery and he sees her and they're on their date, and his cousin, I believe it's Diego, is running to the cemetery because he needs to warn him that this person is not who they're said to be, and he's like running, trying to get there, and then we find out that she's a skeleton. Okay, that is your falling action for that story. Falling action for a story of an hour is you have Louise, who is in her room. She's chanting to herself, I'm free, I'm free, I'm free. That was our climax. And now her sister's at the door asking her to come out because she's afraid she's going to make herself sick. And she's like, I'm fine, I'm not going to make myself sick. But her sister finally tells her to come out anyways, and she does. So they're walking down the stairs together to the main part of the house. Okay, that is the falling action for the story of an hour. Now that leads us to our next element of plot, our final element of plot. So again, you're going to give this box a new color. You're going to color in the bone, give the outline of the box whatever color you want. So this is what we call the resolution. Some of you called it the conclusion. Same thing. So again, kind of like exposition and introduction. If you were close, I didn't count it as you not knowing it. You just know it by a different name. So this year, just to make a connection of, we are going to call it the resolution. So the definition of resolution is the problem is solved and the story comes to an end. Okay? So it's a mix of both. So the resolution is problem is solved, story comes to an end, boom, we're done, happy story. So if we look at The Lady in the Veil, the ghost story, the resolution for that story is that Carlos is now being dragged into the ground by Rosa, this girl that he thought he was wooing and dating, and she's taking him into the ground with her, ultimately killing him. Okay, so that is the end of the story, and his cousin Diego is broken from the spell that he was under, watching what's happening, and it was just too late for him to warn him. So that is the resolution, the end to the situation with him trying to get this girl to date him, and then the end of the story. Okay, story of an hour. We have a twist at the end of the story. The resolution with that story is that she comes down into the main room with her sister, and all of a sudden the key in the door starts jiggling in. Someone walks in through the door, and lo and behold, it's her husband, who's actually not dead, which causes her to have a fright and be startled, and she dies of heart disease. So that is the resolution to that story. So there you have it. All the stories kind of wrapped up. These are the elements of plot. Each of them has a different function in the story. It tells us a different part of what is happening and what is going on. So if you have any questions, do feel free to ask. If you need to pause and look at each of the definitions, here is a zoomed out screen of the definitions and the functions of each part of the plot. All right, that is all I have for you right now. Once you are done taking the notes for today, I do not have an activity, but you can go back and you can finish reading the stories and doing the paragraph writing from Monday, okay, because that is homework. So you can go ahead and use your time. If you finish with this, you can go ahead and work on that. Because tomorrow we are going to do an activity with this. So if you don't understand anything, please contact me so that I can clarify any of the parts of plot. That is it. All right.